All right, welcome into another pre-game Aftershock. Haven't done one of these in a while, and of course, I'm super excited as always to have the radio voice of the San Jose Earthquakes. You can catch him at Ted Ramey Media, and also has a midweek show called The Soccer Hour. You can catch on your favorite podcast platform, as well as 810 The Spread. Ted Ramey, Ted, how are things? Now I know how it feels to try to introduce you versus all the introduction you do for me when you pull me on the radio a couple times this season.
Man, I appreciate it. Always happy to come on with you, Jamin. But man, in terms of how I'm doing, I'm getting a little restless waiting for the Quakes to have games again, because last MLS game was on the 12th, and we got to see Miguel Trauco with the most incredible goal of the year. And, and I'm sure there's some Messi fans who are going to argue with me about that. And then we haven't had a game for the Quakes since the 30th of July in Leagues Cup. It's now August 18th at the time of this recording. And I need some Quakes football in my life, man. I'm going a little stir crazy. So it's a long-winded answer of saying that I need the action back.
Speaking of Leagues Cup, does it feel wild to you that we've had this Messi experience now for several games, and we can still say that he has not played a minute of an MLS League game yet?
I keep on laughing about that. It's working out. This is a rare thing in sports where so far it's working out exactly as intended. Messi comes over, everybody's going nuts. They're talking about the tournament, which I was worried. I didn't know when it was first announced. I was like, are people going to pay attention? Are they going to be bought in?
Right.
Because the individual fan bases will, but once your team's out, I don't know if there'd be kind of a pullback. But yeah, it's wild. Like, everybody's paying attention to Messi, and it's going to make the final third of the season that we're upon that much more intriguing to see. Now that he's done this in Leagues Cup, what's going to happen to Miami in the standings? I think that he and the other players that have joined that team are going to make things pretty formidable in the East. But obviously, it's different when you get into the later stages of the season at Major League Soccer. The heat is still going to be a factor. The humidity. He's saying he's going to play on artificial turf, so that's interesting. But yeah, it is weird that we have not seen him play an MLS League game as of yet. One
of the big things that have been talked about this summer are ticket prices for specifically two different, genres of things. First off, the hype around Messi and being able to see Messi play in the US, and people are shelling out $500, $1,000, $1,500, dollars. And we know that even in this Leagues Cup final, like some of the prices of tickets that are being priced in the stadium, whether it's dynamic ticket pricing or resale value, around $1,500. But you're no stranger probably to ticket prices, because you recently took in Taylor Swift at Levi's Stadium. So look, I mean, we're not going to talk about how much you paid for a Taylor Swift ticket, because my daughter actually got to go to a concert for face value $100 because a friend, was nice enough to let her pay face value for the ticket. That said, some of those Taylor tickets are quite pricey. So if you have $1,000, let's just cap it at $1,000, okay? And you had not gone to the Taylor Swift concert yet, and if you had to pick, your wife said there's $1,000, Ted, you can take a pick. You can go see Taylor, you can go see Messi. Which one are you picking and why?
I would probably say Messi, because his career is more of a limited capacity right now, and I haven't had the opportunity to do it up to this point. And my line of thinking would be like, there will be another Taylor Swift tour, but I don't know how long Messi's going to go. Like, he's still he just won a World Cup. He's still the best player on earth, in my opinion. And I know that could maybe lead to a longer conversation, but yeah, you don't know how much longer he's going to go. And like, there are some, I never got to see Serena in person, and that's one that's going to bug me. I got to see Jordan, been able to see LeBron. Obviously, we've been able to see Steph here up close, Montana, Young, Rice, Bonds,
right.
We go down the list, Jumbo, Patty Marlowe. Like, I've seen these guys in person, and I love those core memories, just like I do love that I've seen the Rolling Stones and U2 and Taylor Swift and Bob Dylan. Those are all important things, but athletes, it's a limited, you've got a limited time frame. So that's why I'm saying that if I had that opportunity, I would choose Messi.
Yeah, he looks like he's having just a lot of fun, and he addressed it yesterday because I never felt like he was having fun when he went to PSG, and he basically said that yesterday in his first press conference, and then follow-up interview with ESPN as well. And if you take a look at the English translations, basically said he wasn't having fun. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of stress leaving Barcelona and picking up and going to PSG. And now he's where he wants to be, getting to spend that time in MLS. He genuinely looks like he is having fun out there. And he does these goal celebrations, and everyone's like, why is he doing Spider-Man celebrations, stuff like that? It's just to get his kids, and connect with his kids who are there. And he does these celebrations, and he's there for his kids. The rest of the stadium is just joining along, but he's just out there having fun right now, playing soccer. And it's the thing that he loves. Does it kind of bring joy, to you to watch him look like he's having this much fun?
Of course. And that's like one of the things that I've always been the biggest on in sports. And because the way our society views it, we make it such serious times. But I'm like, you look at the athletes around just the tops of their game, and like there was not a lot of joy with Tiger Woods. And that was one of the things that I always wondered about, like what was going on with him mentally. And I think he's softened as he's gotten older, and you saw it a little bit when he came back and won the Masters again. But like watching Steph Curry over the course of his career up close and personal as an adult and as a media member in the Bay Area, there's a lot of joy that you get to see out there. And I can remember as a kid, Magic way more with the joy than compared to Larry Bird or a Michael Jordan. And you do see things from athletes, whether or not they are, the joyful type or the serious type, that are going to inspire you. But there is something special about watching someone have a good time and enjoy the moment and be able to relish it and really live in it. And I think that, like you said, with the Spider-Man celebration with Messi and the smiles that he's showing out there, it's great. Like you can't put a price on that to say that, well, you need him to be more locked in. It's like, well, what do you want him to do? Not score the game tying or go ahead game-winning goals? He's doing.
You want him to not put the effort out there when you're paying $1,000 or more to see him?
Exactly. It's like he's out there, he's having fun, and he's still putting in tremendous efforts and doing tremendous things. So to see those two together, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm sure, Quakes fans and fans across the league are kind of, jealous of the opportunity, obviously, that Inter Miami has. But, kudos to David Beckham and team because, Beckham obviously went through some of this, not to this level, of course, when he came to MLS. But, he being someone who had been through that, I'm sure, that is a help to Leo Messi. Acclimating to this, and let's also be clear, he's got a couple friends that have joined him in this, and whereas Beckham didn't bring all of Manchester United with him when he came to the league, and
he had Joe Cannon.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a little bit different than when other players have come to the league, that he did get to kind of bring some people that he already had that chemistry with. But I do think that it's made for great television, great Apple TV viewing. You have to believe Apple's very happy with this investment so far. And as you talked about with Ryan O'Halloran the other day, it's going to make Apple think again about making these types of investments, because certainly this one is paying off for them so far.
It is. And it's another example of things going to plan. And when Apple got in business with Major League Soccer, I'm sure they had aggressive growth strategies. When the biggest player on earth comes in and joins that league, it allows you to be that much more aggressive going forward. It's a fascinating dynamic. Like I said, for Messi coming to Major League Soccer, totally as intended. Everything's going to plan. For Apple getting in business with Major League Soccer now, everything's going to plan. People can say like, well, what happens after Messi? It's like, and I not to be crude, but it's like you get addicted to these high moments, and then it turns you into a fan. Like usually people have these moments where they can point to and say they got hooked, and then they always go and chase that high for the rest of their lives. Not trying to make light of addiction, but I think sports is a form of addiction. I think people can go back to moments When they watched something incredible happen, whether it was a goal from, the San Jose Earthquakes, greatest of all time, Chris Wondolowski, they felt that euphoria and it brought them to watch it more. And right now there's fans who are probably watching Messi, but you don't just watch Messi. You learn about some of his teammates. You learn about the teams that he's playing against. And sometimes that can turn you into a fan and it makes you more broad and aware of the league. So yeah, I mean, it's good to have the biggest stars. And I think Major League Soccer should continue to try and adjust their rules and expand the money and bring in more great players. But I think that Messi is allowing people to learn about the league, whereas they didn't before, which everybody already knew about Messi, but now they are learning about some of the cool stories and talents all around the league.
Yeah, no, I think it's been great already for the league. And I'm interested to see how this all works in league play when you come off the high of a tournament and everything. And now you got to go on the road into, a New England. We've already seen them in Philadelphia, obviously, but when you do some of this travel, Chicago, Nashville, obviously they're going to face in Leagues Cup final, but you can imagine these two teams are going to cross paths if not in the regular season. I don't remember the schedule here, but in the playoffs. And there's a lot of good teams in the Eastern Conference. The West is a slugfest. There's not a lot of teams trying to stand out right now in the West, but the Eastern Conference, the teams are much more spread out. And, the schedule, for Inter Miami is not going to be a cakewalk. Well, let's turn our attention to the Quakes.
Sure.
Because they have their own set of news. So let's talk first about the recent signings, and then we'll take on the Cade Cowell conversation as well. So a couple players coming in before the transfer deadline, one of them, which we've already gotten to see on the field for a few minutes, Ayo Akinola, a forward from Toronto FC, a player that Ian Russell obviously would have been very familiar with from his time there as an assistant, and knows what his potential is, even if he wasn't fully showing it. And then Matthew Hoppe, or just wants to be known as Hoppe, who you got on your show the other day. So, a plug. If you missed that, check out the podcast where Ted interviewed. And also, I think it's on YouTube, your YouTube channel as well.
It's on the Quakes YouTube channel.
Quakes YouTube channel, that's what it was. So check those out for sure, the interview with Hoppe as well. But, these couple players, Lucci, we spoke with Lucci yesterday. He's excited about the competition that this is bringing to the front line, that these players are going to be pushing their teammates who have the starting role, whether that's Jeremy Bobasi, whether that's, currently Cade Cowell. And Cade was, already maybe going to be, having some competition from some of the great play we've seen recently from Jack Skane, who's now working his way back from a hamstring injury. Now, no one's probably pushing Christian Espinoza for a starting job, but what do you think about these signings? And there are two players that clearly need a new start, kind of a refresh. I would say that maybe they're even a bit of a flyer. What are your thoughts about the two players and what they're going to bring?
I like it because not a huge amount of risk with either. And I think you have the chance to see what they can bring, and there's a lot of upside with both. With Ayo Akinola, I think you go back to how he looked younger in his career before the knee injury. And I think that also with Toronto, the way things have been going there for a while, I think I'm not saying that the effort isn't there from the team, but as a rising tide can lift all ships, sometimes when things are on a downward trend, it can depress the ability of all players involved. And again, I'm not questioning the efforts or any of the guys, but it's tough when you're in a bad situation. And I've seen it firsthand in many sports, and it's sometimes hard to rise above. The change of scenery for Ayo, I think, is something that everyone's really looking at, and you see the potential and you see the upside. And I think that's what you're hoping for. He's played at wing and he's played at striker. And I think you can make that comparison to Matthew Hoppe. You're looking at a guy who's shown flashes of brilliance. Now, I know I listened to your talk with Alex, the debate you two had, and I know that you weren't the biggest Hoppe fan in the world, which, to be fair, your viewpoint is understandable and not incorrect. I just think that from when I previously watched him, I liked what he potentially brings. He can play both the wing and the striker, so you're giving yourself depth at both of these positions, which is good with the additions of Hoppe and Akinola. Right. And that's what you need, because squad rotation in the end of the year if we flash back to 2019, that was the biggest problem for the San Jose Earthquakes, even with the additions they did make of Andy Rios and Carlos Fierro. Unfortunately, neither were too impactful. And then there was not a lot of squad rotation in a otherwise condensed schedule, and that kind of did in the Quakes, as well as Chris Wondolowski picking up his first ever red card in Atlanta, which kept him out of an important game. But
we got some good animated gifts out of that, though, Ted. Or do you
good? I would hope
either
so.
way, that does not exist if it's not for that red card. So we always have that at least.
Well, but that's the thing is, like, you never know what's going to happen. Like, we didn't expect that Chris Wondolowski would get the first red card of his career from the bench in a game in Atlanta. I didn't see that one coming.
Nope.
So, things change. Guys get injured. We saw it with Jack Skahan recently. And even in that same game that Skahan went down, Christian Espinosa cramped up, and he did play in the game versus Portland and looked fine. So that was good. But, S happens, for lack of a better expression. And I think the Earthquakes have given themselves options. They've given themselves two players who've got something to prove. And I think that, both of those guys want to get back in the national team conversation, one for Canada, one for the United States. Mm-hmm. And with Matthew Hoppe in particular, I think that he's got the ability to poach, which I also like. And I know it's been a weird ride for him. One of the most interesting things, though, and you referenced that you were listening to my interview with Ryan O'Hanlon the other day as I shamelessly plugged my show, but he said, listen, where he has been, it's been situations where teams have been towards the bottom of the table or fighting for promotion, where there can be a lot of changes and there can be, firings and there can be strategic changes. And he has not been in what we might define as the quote unquote best environment. So maybe right now, coming into a stable environment with San Jose, where Luchi Gonzalez has got things going in the right direction throughout the majority of his first year here, where he understands the system, where Luchi knows how to use him ostensibly from, that experience in the Berhalter system, it allows for that great upside. And both allow this potential without huge financial ramifications. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful for. Not that hope's a strategy. Thank you, Billy Bean. But I do think that there is a lot of potential. And I think that you're looking for the upside, obviously, but you'd rather have upside to look to than nothing at all, right? Like I understand there's some desire for the bank breaking huge move, but that's not happening right now. So you got in players who have something to prove and might be able to do so. If they do, then that's going to bolster your team as you enter the most critical part of the season.
Yeah, the Quakes are dealing with some financial constraints because they spend more on TAM players than any other team in the league. It seems weird for a team that is considered a low spender in the league, but that's been their strategy. There's many ways to build an MLS roster, and one of those ways is to spend a ton of money on DPs and spend a lot of money, cash that you have to put, across multiple years when you do these huge transfer fees, right? The Quakes aren't going to make the huge transfer fees. I mean, their record, was Carlos Carrezo earlier, this year. But, because of those constraints that they put themselves under, it kind of forced Chris Leach, I think, to do what he could with what he had. Mm-hmm. Interesting because these are loan situations, right? And that's the other part about it is you get an opportunity to take a look at these players. You don't have to put a lot of, cash or cap into these particular situations, and you get to find out, are these players that might be beneficial for you going forward. One of the things I think that is interesting about Hoppe, and you could argue that maybe the Quakes don't have this type of player right now, is he does have the ability to kind of mess with people. He has that ability to kind of CONCACAF things up. There's other words we could throw in there that might be a little bit less appropriate for a family show, but you know what I'm saying. He tries to get into people's heads. There's plenty of video out there. He did that in the Gold Cup for the U.S. even. That kind of guy you could see potentially doing two things in a locker room, either galvanizing everyone around him to be like, hey, this guy's bringing some fresh energy and that's great. Or he's going to piss everybody off and everyone's going to be tired of his antics after a couple of months, right? It'll be interesting to me to see which is true for Hoppe. But if you think back to 2012, The Quakes had another guy or two that were kind of like that in the locker room, and those guys galvanized that 2012 team along with Chris Wondolowski and made it one of the most interesting MLS teams of all time. I find there's flavors of that with Matthew Hoppe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, you love an instigator, and it's actually one of the things that I like about Tanner Beeson as well. And I know there's a big debate, and it's had on fans of your show, and I see it on social media of who should be starting, Mensah or Beeson. Right. And the one thing I give Tanner Beeson a lot of credit for is that guys don't like playing against him. I think that he's got, despite the fact that he's, Cardinal, Stanford education, and he comes across as such a sweet, low-key guy off the pitch, guys don't want to play against him. They don't like bodying against him. They don't like going in there in the trenches. And I think that when you kind of bring more of those types of players in, and I think it's part of the core of what the Earthquakes are, is that, so much of their identity has been the David versus the Goliath, that teams know they're in for a battle. They might be a little more bruised and battered after playing the Quakes. And so bringing another guy who can be an instigator, who can tick somebody off, who can, like we talk about the stories about guys playing against Lenny and Gordo, and they would talk about they were covered with scratches and bruises. They grab onto their midsection. Bring it. I'm not advocating dirty play or anything, but make life uncomfortable for the opposition. Right. If you have another guy who can do that while contributing, I'm all for it. And plus, it is fun. Not that you want to see anybody get a red card, but I love tempers flaring and getting under guys' skin and making sure that there's something on their mind other than the next play they're about to make.
The game within the game. It's a big part of this sport, like it or not. So let's turn our attention to someone whose future may have a big link to how much opportunity Matthew Hoppe and Ayo Akinola get, which is Cade Cowell. Mm-hmm. The rumors are true. We basically got a confirmation directly from Luchi Gonzalez yesterday that, Bologna is interested in Cade. We've heard different versions of, kind of what the offers have been, ranging from a loan of 3.5 a loan, but with a buyout of 3.5 million up to a normal type deal, which would be more in the $5 million range. And, talks have continued between the two clubs, but nothing finalized so far. First, do you think we see Cade Cowell, on the pitch against Vancouver this weekend? But second, do you think it's also, has Cade Cowell reached the limit of what he can do with the San Jose Earthquakes, in your opinion? Or is it maybe Luchi Gonzalez hasn't found that magic yet with him in terms of unlocking what some of that potential is?
So the first part of that, do we see him on Sunday in Vancouver? I honestly don't know. This is a situation that we have not been presented with too many times. And, if there is something that feels like it's about to happen, and knowing my luck, something will probably happen while we're recording this.
Of course.
Just to invalidate everything we're
should just go check Twitter right now or X now.
But it's one of those things where I'm not sure. I don't know which way they're going to play it. And we'll just have to wait and see in terms of that. And because I don't know. I mean, we know that these, Luchi, like you said, confirmed it. What that means of how they're going to play it, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see it. It's fascinating, and I'm intrigued to have this happen. It's another one of those things where things are going according to plan, relatively speaking, where you brought in this high-level talent. I think that when they signed him, he was the number 2 top drawer guy for his birth year. And, he's shown these flashes of brilliance. And in terms of if he has reached his capacity with what he can do with the Quakes, no, I don't. It's not that I don't think that he has. I just don't think that's the right question. I've heard a lot of people make give the take of, he's maxed out, what he can do with this club. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true, because a player isn't limited by a team. And I don't mean to say that negatively of either the player or the team, but I just think players can do great things. But Cowell's had moments. The thing that bothers me is people say, well, he's not producing this year. And I'm wanting to point out, okay, but he's also created some great opportunities for his teammates, and he's made plays that have set up goals, and he's given the defense more to worry about, which has created more opportunities for Christian Espinosa and Jeremy Ebobisse up top. And it's not just numbers. That's one of the things that I look at is it's beyond just what the production is. And you always want more production, no denying that. But Cade does a lot more. He gives problems to defenses. They have to worry about him. They know what he's capable of. We've seen it with the men's national team. We saw it at U20. We've seen it at different flashes with the Earthquakes in Major League Soccer. You go back to the start of the 2021 campaign. I think you asked Dallas or DC what exactly they saw out there, and they were like, yeah, well, that's one of the most, incredible performances from Cade Cowell, that of any MLS player. That outside the boot Kevin De Bruyne pass that he had to Christian Espinosa. Right. I mean, freaky stuff, man. So you see all this potential. I don't think the Earthquakes are limiting that potential. I don't, that's to me not a great take. It's people who just kind of want to come down on the Quakes. But much like I said with Matthew Hoppe or Nayo Akinola, like maybe he does need that change of scenery because, and I know that we can talk about the differences in which guys defend in Europe versus how they do in MLS. He might have a little bit more space. He might be able to make different kinds of plays. He might be utilized differently. So, I think the sky is still the limit for Cade Cowell. And, we've seen some of the problems that he's continued to have throughout the course of his career. He tries to overpower defenders, dribble through them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think that there's been the desire here over whoever his coaches have been, whether it's been Matias Almeida, Alex Covello, right now Luchi Gonzalez, to see what he can do. Now, maybe that might not fly the same way. He might not have the same liberty if he were to go play in another league elsewhere. So we'll have to wait and see. But, Cade, he's 19 years old. He had the fastest recorded speed in Major League Soccer last year. The sky is still the limit. It would be a great story for everybody involved if he does go on to Europe and do big things and really solidify himself with the United States men's national team. And then some of those sell-on monies come back to the Earthquakes as well. So it's really fascinating, though, because of what Cade Cowell has the potential of being. He has just made plays that are so wildly athletic and on par with players that you see playing at the top of the world, where it's like he does these things that you're like, I can't believe he just did that. The consistency hasn't been there. And it might be that change of scenery, different responsibility, different role, different things could change all that. It's not that the Earthquakes are holding him back in any means, because he's in many ways flourished for where he is at 19 years old, looking like he could be headed to Europe, to where if he does get in a new situation that things could suddenly take off. And if that is the case, I would hate to lose a talent like that from San Jose. But at the same time, we know that Major League Soccer is not yet, and I do say yet because things are trending in the right direction, but it's not in the same regard of where these top European leagues are yet. So, what am I supposed to do? Be like, oh, I want to keep him here forever? It's like, selfishly, of course. But realistically, he needs, if it's there, he needs to go after that opportunity. That's what any athlete would do. You go out there, you chase these opportunities. You've got a short window for these maximum earnings. Go for it. And if he has success, that'd be awesome. But I'm not going to ever say like, oh, he's come to his full level here in San Jose. It's just, no, this is where he is right now. There's an opportunity presented elsewhere, which could lead to greater things for him. If that's the case, awesome. And then I was joking with my wife. I was like, well, maybe his younger brother can come up and take the same number, so people will already have built-in jerseys. That's my lazy take.
Yeah, obviously, the Chance Cowell being a homegrown player, and I think that becomes official, if I recall right, in the start of the 2024 year. I think January 1st, it becomes kind of official, because he'll probably have done whatever his academy requirements are, by then, to be able to be a homegrown player in MLS. So it'd be quite interesting to see Cade Cowell leave just as his brother is arriving, and then you just start a new hype cycle all over again. One more question for you around the Cade situation, Ted, is I see two different primary takes, and with some variations on these themes, but two primary takes. One is that the Quakes need to bring in GAM. The Quakes need to become a seller in the international marketplace. They need, if they're going to try to copy a model like a Philadelphia model, well, then you need to move players like Philadelphia did to be able to get the GAM and revenue back in, to be able to get other players, right? And to create that, what I call a virtuous cycle. I'm sure I'm not the first to use that term, but so some people want Cade to go at any price right now. Let's say at least 3 million or more. Others go like, no, 3.5 and a loan deal, like that's the terms, like that's a low ball offer. The Quakes should hold out for more. Kind of where do you land in this particular type of question? Is there a magic number you kind of have in your head where you go like, okay, above this amount, it's a no-brainer. Anything below this, it kind of depends on maybe the sell-on clause and other terms?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a magic number per se. I mean, I think that you have to look at the market realistically and what it might bear. And I think that's the problem. And I think why people are kind of saying, no, it should be higher. And again, I'm not the right guy to say what the number should be, because that's a longer conversation. We can go into greater details. I don't know how much time you want to spend with me in one mid-morning, but for Cade, it is potential more than anything else, because he is not, he's had these supernova moments, but it's not been sustained. And I think that's going to be the main arguments of any club that would be looking at him and saying like, yes, we see these great moments, but it has not been sustained in terms of pure production. I'm not trying to take away from the other things that he does out there on the pitch, which are also at a high level. But let's be honest, beyond the intangibles that you and I could talk about and what he presents, at the end of the day, it does come down to sheer production, and they're for that position specifically. And so any club around the world is going to point to that, and to which I don't have a great comeback for that beyond being like, I've watched every second of his professional career. I can tell you ad nauseum about all the little things that he does, which are still not as valuable as the literal production. And so I think that's why the number isn't as high as some people would maybe like it to be. And I think the Earthquakes have to be pragmatic as well and say, okay, here's what we have right now on the left wing. We have Benji Kikanovic, who has not been the same player he was, and I'm not sure why that is, although I will point out that he's been a second-half player over the course of the 2021 and 2022 seasons. It seems like it kind of came in a bunch towards the end. In 2021, he scored a goal, then had a thigh injury and was out for a stretch and came back and added 3 more. And then last year, it seemed like the majority of the 6 goals he scored were towards the later stages of the season. So you've got that. You've got Jack Skahan, who showed great potential. And not that I'm expecting Benji Kikanovic or Jack Skahan to save the day, but they are 2 options. And then you've got Ayo Akinola. And then you've also got now Matthew Hoppe. And then, you look at Oseni Buddha and the differences that he can play. And you say, if we're going to play the game of, can you plug in numbers elsewhere and give yourself options? Like, yeah, you have to be pragmatic about it, because, then what happens, and this is, again, I'm knocking on the wood here, but like, what if Cade goes out there and sustains an injury, which is always a risk for an athlete?
Sure.
Then that changes the entire narrative of his career. And you want to be able to not have something like that happen, and where you have like, well, we didn't make the sale and there was an injury, and now, this has not gone the way that we had hoped it would. I mean, there's so many intangibles, right? And the number represents so many different things, but it's just a matter of weighing these options, what he is right now, what he represents potentially, where the team has been with him, where the team has been without him, and what the team also has in potential of replacing him. And I think that's why Chris Leach makes so much more money than I do. He has the mind to be able to weigh all these things. And this is the thing I will give about Chris Leach, that I know people have said, oh, well, there hasn't been the huge splash. And okay, he went out there and did make a pretty splashy move in getting Jeremy Ebobisse. He did go out there and bring in Jamiro Montero, who hasn't been as productive this year, but was very good last year. Mm-hmm. He's been able to bring in Trauco and Rodriguez and Acapo, who have all been impactful players. Carlos Gruezo, impactful player. And
Daniels looked amazing at times this season, and really that's lifted up the goalkeeper position too.
Yeah. So I feel like he's got an eye for talent and understanding what works. So it makes me feel comfortable with what he's brought in and what it feels about any change that may occur. So again, Chris Leach, I'm a fan of his. I'm a friend of his, obviously. I'm not going to say that I'm not biased, but I think his greatest strength has really been in identifying players that can work. And with Jamiro Montero, I know I can say his production hasn't been as high this year, but he's had, massive games where he's had big moments and big plays and, really been just a game changer. And sometimes players, it's not going to be every game. It's going to be individual games where they have their moments and help them get a big win. Like he was great in that game against Philadelphia, which also included a Miguel Trauco wonder goal. So all these things are in consideration, right? And it's hard to say that all of those things jive with the specific number, but it's all of those things are at play right now. And I think that's the hardest thing is like the pragmatism versus the potential and the here and now versus the what ifs versus the money. It's a lot of moving pieces, right? And it's exciting though. Like if you want to be this selling model, which I think that, is part of the idea of being like a Philadelphia, being like a Dallas, is that you are going to be presented with these hard decisions. And while nobody wants to ever come back and say they wish they could have gotten more, I don't think you also want to look at a situation and say, well, nothing ended up happening. That didn't make the sale and things didn't work out. And again, these are the things that Chris Leach and his staff have been thinking about for quite some time. And I get to talk about it obviously, but it's easy to talk about, right? Like this is fun, but when you're actually there putting pen to paper and deciding what you're going to do, you can see there's so many factors at play.
Yeah, Ted, I really appreciate you joining me today. I know you got to run. Obviously, people can find you at Ted Ramey Media I still have the bird there, and I'm not sure I'm ever going to change that, but X bird, whatever you want to call it. And then 810 The Spread. Check out the Soccer Hour usually Wednesday. I say every Wednesday. It does move a little bit from time to time, but most of the time on Wednesdays evening. And so check out that show. And then, of course, the Matthew Hoppe interview on the Earthquakes YouTube if you missed that. Thanks, Ted. Appreciate you joining me here today. Too bad I won't get to see you in Vancouver. I am hoping to be there and bring coverage from BC Place on Sunday. But as always, we'll be in contact and getting your thoughts. Hopefully we'll hear more about a deal for Cade Cowell here relatively soon.
Sounds good, Jamin. Anytime, man. Keep up the great work.
Have a great call. Take care, Ted.